live. You ready?
All right. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to hit the button. I'm going to introduce you, and then I'm going to give some instructions to the audience, okay?
I can't hear you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Cutler. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you're all doing well.
Now I can hear you. Sorry. That was me. I had my volume down. I muted this before.
I'm joined today by Greg Roth, who will be speaking about developing a challenge mindset to reshape your skills, your work, and your identity. Welcome, Greg. We're very excited to have you here today and to learn about the challenge mindset. I'll give you some quick housekeeping information to our audience and then introduce Greg. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please click the Ask a Question button below the video to ask your questions throughout the webinar. Also, as a reminder, the recording will be available tomorrow. Greg Roth is a keynote speaker, trainer, and consultant who studies challenges as a way to change behavior, build skills, and achieve big breakthroughs. He's taken the Renaissance man concept and applied it to his career. Greg has held over 100 jobs, big and small. Some of the more notable ones: journalist, campaign director, magazine publisher, videographer for PJ Professional, lobbyist, show producer, performer, tour guide, garbage man, rickshaw driver, crayon maker, and mascot. Greg has been featured on CNN, in the Washington Post, Voice of America, NPR, and Associations Now. He is also a faculty member at the U.S. Chamber Foundation's Institute for Organization Management. Thank you, Greg, for taking the time to be here with us today, and I'll let you take it away from here.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everybody. I am going to switch my screen over, get this going, and I believe we're ready to go. Well, thank you. Here is what I'm going to be discussing today. A different 10,000-hour rule. What are challenges? Why do they matter? The 5 qualities of a challenge mindset and finding the challenge. But let's first start with a story. Hugh McLeod was a copywriter at an advertising agency in New York City. Pretty good job, creative, tough, interesting, but not the answer. Something was missing. He didn't know what. He tried goal setting. Where do I want to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years? But he didn't know, so he couldn't come up with the right goal. One night, feeling burned out, he took out a business card and drew on it. Why? It was small, kind of fun. He thought, cool. So he did another, and then another. Pretty soon he had 50, and then 100. He did them at bars, on the subway, in the park, over lunch, at coffee shops, wherever he felt like. Each one was different. He even gave them a name. He called them Hugh cards. He keeps going. He doesn't show them to anyone. He's not even sure what they are, but he wonders, what if I get to 10,000? He doesn't know what he'll do with them, but he figures he'll have something. At least he'll get better at drawing his thoughts. Within a few years, he has thousands. So he starts a blog. He calls the blog Gaping Void. He posts a cartoon with some thoughts. They're funny, irreverent, raw, painful. Word starts to get around. Pretty soon, they start showing up in PowerPoints at conferences. Not his PowerPoints, other people's PowerPoints. People who he's never met. People like myself. You guys know how the internet works. So he takes the 40 Hugh cards he likes the most and does a book. Calls it Ignore Everybody and 39 Other Keys to Creativity. It's pretty successful. Guy Kawasaki credits it with helping him beat writer's block. Seth Godin digs it too. He asked Hugh to illustrate his next book. The next thing that happens is people want prints to hang on their walls. So he starts making large versions of the little business card drawings available as prints. Not just at home, at the office, companies want them. They feel it provides a different aesthetic than your normal office hallway art, which we've all seen, right? They feel it speaks to their company culture better. That gives Hugh another idea. He starts the Gaping Void Culture Design Group. He's still drawing, but he's also helping companies build creative, focused workplace cultures. He shows them how to do better, more original, more challenging work. How to have new ideas in a noisy, risk-averse world. Today, his drawings hang on the walls of over 5,000 companies around the world. HP, Intel, Microsoft, Roche, they all have gaping void culture walls as statements of why they do what they do and how they do it. All this from drawing on the backs of business cards. You never intended these cards to lead to anything other than just more cards. There was no next step until there was. Eventually, it led him to a place that didn't exist at the beginning. How did this happen? We're talking about a guy who had no formal training in drawing. He didn't go to art school. He didn't work at a big consulting firm that does organizational culture audits or whatever. He didn't have a roadmap, a plan, or even a set of goals. He still got to a place he wanted to be. I would argue he had something more illuminating than training, background, or goals. He found a challenge. And what do I mean by challenge? Well, first of all, this isn't something I'm making up. Formally and informally, challenges are all around us. I've been doing a weekly newsletter for 3 years and have been collecting stories of people who invent little projects for themselves, not as side hustles or attempts to go viral, just because they want to try something new. And I think some of it is thanks to this guy. Matt Cutts was one of Google's first employees. But in 2011, when he gave a TED Talk, he didn't talk about his work. He didn't talk about anything at Google. Instead, he talked about his attempts to do new things for 30 days. This is one of the shortest TED Talks out there. It's only 5 minutes, and it has over 12 million views. Why did Matt try these things? Because he was stuck in a rut. And how many of us have been in ruts? So Matt decided to try very simple things like not watching TV for a month or biking to work every day. Matt hated biking. He had no real interest in doing it. But after putting a poll out to some friends, that was one of the ideas that came up. So he gave himself permission to do it for a month, and he discovered that he loves biking. So in a nutshell, that's a challenge. A challenge is a project with the scope of action and time that is meaningful. That meaning is the motivation. It's why we would challenge ourselves in the first place. To put it a different way, it's an experiment to test and try something we perceive to be difficult. There's a reason we're not doing the thing already. A challenge helps us explore our relationship to our barriers and our limitations. Now, after collecting these challenges, like I said, for over the past 3 years, I've come to the conclusion that there are 4 basic types. A deliberate challenge is a repetitive act aimed at a single destination. An example would be a workout challenge. You see things all the time like, I'm going to take the 100 push-ups a day challenge. Not necessarily the greatest idea, but it's out there. A discovery challenge is meant to explore an action or behavior that is interesting to us, that we can learn from. An example is the Whole30, which is marketed not as a traditional diet, but as an experiment to learn what works best for us. I'm doing the Whole30 this month as we speak. Third, a creative challenge is an effort to make something or practice a skill. National Novel Writing Month, which hundreds of thousands of people do every November, is an example of a creative challenge. And finally, a competitive challenge is an event or series of events where individuals or teams pursue a breakthrough or a reward. Hackathons, those are good examples of a competitive challenge. Here's one more way to think about things. Our goals are destinations. It's the places we want to go to. Our systems are how we get to our goals. They are the journeys that we go on. So what does it take to do a challenge? What is a challenge mindset? Well, after digging deeper into hundreds of these stories and interviewing a number of people that have done these challenges, I found some patterns. I believe it's an interrelated series of 5 qualities: curiosity, openness, immersive action, journeyism, which is a term I'm making up, okay, but stick with me, I'll explain it later, and compassionate perspective. Now let's look at each one. Curiosity. What do you find to be fascinating? When I first set out to write a book, which I'm currently working on a book called The Challenge Mindset, but when I first started writing a book, I had just finished watching Mad Men, and I thought, The most famous creative director in the world might be a fictional character. That's weird. I wanted to learn more about the real job of learning creative teams. So I started interviewing any creative director I could find who would talk to me. And that is how I met David Smale, who used to run the BBDO office in Vietnam. And David may be the only person who has taken all 110 of the skills assessments on the job website Indeed. He just started doing them while his newborn was napping and he was job searching. He found it fascinating to learn about others' jobs and what makes them difficult. He now has a project to talk about in job interviews. But more importantly, curiosity is a good skill for someone in marketing and advertising who has to understand the wants and needs of customers and consumers. SurveyMonkey has made curiosity its central value. They talk about having a culture of curiosity. They expect their leadership to encourage staff to ask hard questions. They have a Best Question of the Week award. That's like a weekly challenge. Curiosity is the beginning of a worthwhile challenge. Curiosity can sustain us when the challenge gets tough. So how do you work on your curiosity? Well, 3 suggestions. Practice observation. Be more intentional in noticing your surroundings. Ask questions like what if and why. These are the questions of someone who is hungry for knowledge. Curiosity, after all, is hunger. And find the surprise or mystery. Learn to recognize or appreciate the things we don't understand yet. There can be great joy in being surprised. We don't have to be right or be a know-it-all all the time. Number 2, openness. How many of you have taken the Big 5 personality assessment? I recommend it. Doesn't take very long. It's generally the most trusted personality type testing assessment tool that's out there. Openness is one of the 5 traits that it measures. And thankfully, I've scored pretty high on that quality. I'm very proud of that. One person who hasn't, though, is Shonda Rhimes. And if you don't know Shonda's name, you know her work. She runs a couple shows, maybe you've heard of them, Grey's Anatomy and Scandal. But at Thanksgiving one year, her sister called her out on never accepting invitations. You're too closed off, she said. This took Shonda by surprise. So she decided she was going to try and accept more of these invitations. And one of the first ones that she got was to give the commencement speech at her alma mater, Dartmouth. She dreads doing it so much that she writes a speech, and on the plane, she tears it up because she hates it. And she starts all over. She begins by saying how much she doesn't want to be there in the speech. But as the speech unfolds, she talks about the reason she's there, because she made a commitment to challenging herself to be more open. And that was the birth of her book, Year of Yes. She details all of the ways that she says yes in an effort to welcome more of life into her life. That was her challenge. All she had to do was change one word. So how can we improve our openness? First, we can flip our fear. We can make fear the thing that drives us, not what holds us back. Make fear the reason for doing something. 2, add variety. We have so many routines in our lives. You can pick one and change it for a short time. Give your brain a chance to experience something new or a series of things that are new and different from your normal status quo. And tell other stories. This is a technique I've been reading about. Telling other people's stories, stories that we know but didn't happen to us, allows us to live through the actions we haven't taken as we describe them. Some researchers feel this boosts our openness. Okay, quality number 3, immersive action. This is mostly self-explanatory. Every challenge is an action we're taking. But here's an unusual example. Marcia McNutt was a geophysicist and researcher at MIT. Like an earth nerd, that's what I like to call it. She had lots of projects to work on. She had a team of earth nerds running around doing what she needed them to do. She'd been in MIT for 15 years. To a lot of people, it's an academic dream job. But to her, it wasn't the answer. Then one day, she got a call from an organization in California to be their new executive director. It's a true bird in the hand, two in the bush situation. Should I stay here at MIT in a wonderful job that has afforded me so much opportunity? Or should I go? Should I take the risk and move across the country to a brand new job with a new organization in a completely different type of setting and role? How do I know which one of those is best? Well, most of us might do a column A, column B, kind of pros and cons type list. Marcia took that a step further. To figure it out, she devised a 2-week challenge. She spent 1 week acting as if she was going to stay in her job and planned her life that way. I will remain at MIT, and here's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow and next week and next month and next year, and this is what my life will look like, and this is what I would do if I stayed at MIT. And then she spent the second week acting as if she was going to take the job in California. She made all of the plans of how she would do it, where she would start, what she would do in her first week on the job. After doing both of these exercises in her 2-week challenge, she decides to take the new job and leave MIT. She doesn't regret it because that job leads to another job back on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. at the Obama administration, in the Obama administration. And that job led her to yet another job where she became the 22nd director and first woman ever to lead the National Academy of Sciences. All thanks to a little 2-week decision challenge where she immersed herself in each of her choices. She attempted to live each of those choices 1 week at a time. Just like Hugh MacLeod, it led her to a place that she could not have imagined at the time. Challenges are great for cultivating more immersive action. We learn by doing. A simple pros and cons list is fine. It's a perfectly fine solution. But if we want to know and understand more deeply the decision that's in front of us, immersing ourselves is that much more of a richer experience. They force us to take focus on our behavior, be incremental with our habits, and use a defined time frame to cultivate some urgency. She picked 1 week each, 2 weeks total to make her decision. Like Marcia, if you're not doing an action challenge, which is working out or creating something, you can start with this kind of immersive thought experiment. Okay, number 4, journeyism, my new made-up word. Here's what I mean by that. The road trip is one of the great American journeys, right? What about during a pandemic, though? Road trips are down 1,015%. I just made up that number, but it's probably true. That's not stopping Uday Schultz, a student at Harvard. He decided this summer to cross the U.S. by using Google Street View, 1 click at a time, Seattle to New York. It sounds maddening, infuriating probably. But here's what's cool about it. Schultz is interested in transportation infrastructure. So on his trip, he's now taking every side trip he comes across to check out roads, bridges, tunnels, and any other project that he then uses to teach himself about how these things get built. And that's what I mean by journeyism. It's falling in love with the journey without worrying too much about the destination. He's going from Seattle to New York, but the way that he gets there is the point of why he's doing this in the first place. It's also a perfect metaphor for the world we're in right now. He's making the best of a bad situation. Every time you read about an accidental invention, that's a form of journeyism. Being able to stay in the moment. This is Lonnie Johnson, a NASA scientist. He was working on a project in his bathroom one night when a stream of water shot clear across the room. He didn't think to himself, that's not what I was trying to do. Instead, his first thought was, hey, that would make an amazing water gun. And that, my friends, is how the Super Soaker was born. An $80 million success story by accident. Lonnie recognized the gift he was given in a moment of serendipity. Instead of getting too caught up in where he was headed, he practiced journeyism. With journeyism, we concentrate on our process and its progress instead of always worrying about the destination. So how do we improve our journeyism. Remember, there's something called the arrival fallacy. We think that reaching a goal is going to make us happy, and it does for a brief moment. But neuroscience tells us there's often a letdown after that. We get a hit of the adrenaline and then it fades, and we're left feeling a little bit of emptiness over the goal. Is that all it was? I got here, now I'm here, now what? We need to balance these arrivals with appreciating how we get there in the first place. We can empower the unexpected, just like Lonnie Johnson did. Journeyism is about finding truth or significance in little moments that otherwise might pass us by. And finding what the best pain is. This comes from Mark Manson talks about this. Manson, I think, actually, is his name, Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. When he talks about the best pain, what he means is think about something that you enjoy that's hard. Hard things are fulfilling. So what pain do we tolerate when we do hard things that we love? Finally, compassionate perspective. As a result of doing a challenge, we should have a better understanding of who we are, but who others are as well. We recognize personal identity. If you do a workout challenge, you know a little bit more about what it's like to be a healthier, more in shape person. In the case of Eddie Moore Jr., he wants us to foster more racial understanding. So a few years back, he created the 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge. For 3 weeks, each day you read, watch, or listen to an important piece of Black culture and discuss in small groups. The challenge is being used by dozens of organizations across the country, including the American Bar Association and the YWCA. It was growing pretty steadily over the past few years, and then 2020 happened. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. You can see just through the YWCA, it's growing exponentially this year. This is all geared towards finding a perspective outside of your own. This is the end result of a good challenge. You will learn something about identity. It might be what you can be or who others are. Challenges help us understand the world outside ourselves. We can improve our compassionate perspective by being an active listener. One of my favorite stories from my book is a woman named Leslie who lives in Northern California and realized that she was in a bit of a political bubble. Every single person she knew socially or through work held the same beliefs as her. So, against maybe her better judgment, she put up a post on Nextdoor and asked for people who disagreed with her on 3 key issues, some fairly hot button issues, if they would meet her for coffee, and she wouldn't try to change their mind. She just wanted to listen to them and their beliefs. And as you can imagine, on social media, she got a trove of replies, something like 70 replies. And she ended up meeting with 10 different people over coffee who held much more conservative views to her very liberal views. And she told me about how most of those conversations went. People started by trying to convince someone, and then as she listened more and didn't engage in the argument part of things, they felt relieved that they could just express themselves. And it became an exercise in just being together, even though you have opposite views. It was a really, really wonderful personal challenge that she did, mostly out of curiosity, but because she realized she wanted to be able to teach her kids how to be an active listener. And we can say things like, I used to think this, but now I think that. That's how we can improve our compassionate perspective, by acknowledging the ways that we can change our minds. So there they are. Those are the 5 qualities of a challenge mindset. We start with curiosity. We open ourselves to trying something new, even if just for a short time. We immerse ourselves in the action we're taking. We enjoy the moments on the journey because they could take us in a different direction. We come out with perspective outside of our own understanding. These are 5 qualities that get better as we do more challenges, but they're also a framework for how to design a challenge. Start with what you're curious about. What are you open to doing? Take the immersive action, enjoy the journey, and then come out of it with a new appreciation for a different way of living or a different way of thinking. At any point in our lives, we can find a challenge that is meaningful to us. I encourage you to think in terms of challenges because they help us focus on giving instead of getting. So that is my presentation. That is a wrap. Thanks, everyone. And I would be happy to do questions.
Thank you, Greg. Do you know or do you recommend a certain personality test?
Yeah, Big Five is, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see. I mentioned the Big Five, and from what I've seen, folks who I trust, like Adam Grant, who's professor at Wharton Business School, has said that it is the most reliable personality test. Now, something that's interesting to note is that there are others out there. I think 16 personalities, I think it's called, is one. Myers-Briggs is, of course, one of the most famous. Myers-Briggs is an interesting case. It's a test that was originally developed by a mother and daughter team who had no psychological background, science background whatsoever. So it's kind of been, sometimes mired in a little bit of controversy over the years. But that story of the founding of the Myers-Briggs, this is a little bit of a tangent, is a really interesting story that is profiled in a book called The Personality Brokers. So if you want to read a really wild story about personality tests, read that book. If you want to take a personality test, I recommend doing the Big Five.
Okay. Another question, how would you relate the challenge mindset to implementing new habits on a daily basis?
Yeah, great question. So if you think about, again, habits and then systems are the things that help us attempt new habits. So Matt Cutts, the example, wanted to try biking. You can look at biking to work as a habit. So it took him however long it took him, 20 minutes a day, right? So you dedicate a certain amount of time to this habit that you want to work on. The challenge is really the framework of how you go about implementing the challenge in your life. If it's a deliberate challenge and it's about working out, then you make time to work out and you set the challenge of, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks. This is exactly how I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to appreciate it as I'm doing it. And here is what I'm looking to learn out of it once I'm done. Here's what I want to discover, right? So the challenge is kind of like a container for how you strategically try to develop the habits. Now, the thing about challenges is that they're not only habit binding. Like there are numerous examples of people that did challenges because it was just more of like a passion project. Like Matt Zerbo is a guy who is he worked on like an oil tanker or in an oil field. I forget. He had some crazy daytime job. He wrote a children's story every night for a year. 365 children's stories because he had a 4-year-old daughter, and it became a labor of love. His challenge was write a children's story every day for a year, which is not where I'd recommend you start. That is extremely difficult to do, but it is what he was curious about. If he could do, he was open to doing it. He would do this, would immerse himself in inventing the story every night, and then appreciate each story individually on behalf of his daughter, as they were kind of a gift to her. And then he came out of it with all kinds of lessons for how to create, how to think about stories, how he thinks about his job and how he thinks about his free time, and how he thinks about his daughter. So habits are one of the things that you can achieve with challenges, and you can use, again, if you go back to the first 3-part thing, it's a project with a time and with a scope, the action you're taking in a time, and there's a meaning behind it. I see a lot of people doing habit challenges or just trying to develop habits because they think it's something they should do. These 100 push-up challenges, they drive me crazy. It's like, it's really bad for your body if that's all you do. But there has to be some sort of meaning that's beyond just doing the actual act. And so that's why that's where a challenge helps flesh out, why do I want this? Why would I dedicate time to this? What do I hope to get out of it? But also, will this fulfill me by giving myself to the challenge for a certain amount of time? So it's a very long answer, but challenges are a good strategy framework for habits, but they can also be for other things as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Do you have a book recommendation related to this topic, or book recommendations for personal or professional growth?
Yeah, for habits, the really popular one right now is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a very practical step-by-step guide about almost automating your habits. Always putting your keys by the door, so that way you know to grab your keys on the way out. Like, it's something you no longer have to think about. That becomes a habit. So that's a really practical book. I like, for more reading enjoyment, I like Power of Habit, the classic book by Charles Duhigg. There are others that I'm blanking on. Also, my book, which will be out next year, is about this. So don't forget that, even though it won't be out next week. It would be nice if it were timed a little bit better, but I'm still writing it right now. So I will be doing a book called The Challenge Mindset that talks more about these stories, how they fit into our lives, what we can use them to do. Other books. Why don't I turn around and look at what I got? Yeah, Power of Habit. I know I'm blanking, but maybe I can send a few more recommendations.
Okay.
I actually just read a book really interesting about the life hacking movement. So this is kind of like most well-known, highest profile part of the personal development world. This guy, Joseph Regal, he's a professor at Southeastern University, is in the Boston area, I think. He wrote a book called Hacking Life, and it's all about how life hackers try to optimize every part of our lives. And it's a natural extension to try to be the best at everything we do. But I try to separate challenges from optimization, because challenges are deeper and richer than simply trying to just 90-10 every single thing that we do. So this book by Joseph Regal is really interesting about how people have taken the idea of life hacking to an extreme, and how that can be a dangerous pursuit, let's say.
Okay. We actually had James Clear on Atomic Habits as a past webinar, so that's on our recorded ones for the person to ask that question.
Nice company.
Yeah. Let's see. We have another question. What would be a recommended challenge for job development? The Indeed.com assessment sounds overwhelming.
Yeah. So the thing I'll say about, and let me first say, when I talked about meaning, don't do a challenge because someone else did it. No one had ever done what David did before. It was kind of a weird thing that he didn't set out to do, but as he started doing them, he got more into it. And those assessments, by the way, only take 5 to 10 minutes. They're not super long. So as I was saying, he did them basically when his baby was taking a nap. So it organically kind of happened. A challenge for your career, well, if it's a job search, then you do have a destination. You're trying to get a job. So advice I got a long time ago when I was job searching was, this is a little bit kind of like a challenge project. Make a list of your top 50 connections, the people that you have the most social capital with through LinkedIn or whatever your personal network is. And then divide them into 3 tiers. The people that can hire you, the people that know the people that can hire you, and the people that are super connected that can help you in some way. And reach out and schedule talks with every single one of them. Now, you can pick whatever number you want. You can make it start with 10, start with 15. But a guy who's a career counselor told me this is the project that he recommends to people, because it will eventually help you find a job that is not by answering an ad, but by working through your network. But it also is, if you start now and you give it time, you give it a few months, it's an exercise in developing deeper connections with your network. You're not just going to them and asking them for something. You're finding the 50 people who are best positioned to help you and forging deeper connections with them individually, meaningful connections, not just like, so, hey, could you like line me up with a job like yesterday? Mm-hmm. So my advice is to design that challenge around what you want out of your career. What is your target? Now, if you have a specific goal of finding a job, that's one thing. But if you have a more general target, like I want to be better at a certain skill, or I want to be, I'm in this job, I would like to be in a job more like that. Find people who have either made that transition, who are in that job now, or people that know people that are in like kind of your perfect job, and get to know them a little bit better. I mentioned road trips. Another story that I have in the book is the kids who founded Road Trip Nation, which was a reality TV show that was on PBS a bunch of years ago. They got a Winnebago, or I think an RV. And after college, they didn't know what to do. So they took the summer and they drove around and set up interviews with everyone that they thought had cool jobs. And they were surprised how many people like talked to them. They talked to like VPs at like the Cartoon Network, at movie studios, all kinds of different businesses. And they just asked them about the career path. And what they found is that a lot of these folks had these kind of winding career paths where they were just kind of, going to the next good enough rock, sort of like the Hugh McLeod story, and making the best of that there, and then finding the new rocks there. So, my advice is to not get too caught up into like designing the master plan, but think about like, what's the next rock or two that you want to jump to, and what does that look like? And maybe kind of deconstruct it a little bit by talking to folks, by researching some more, and by trying out different things. Like I got into speaking by volunteering at a women's homeless shelter. That was the first place that would let me get in front of a group of people and talk. And I realized I loved it so much that like, hey, this is what I want to do for a living. Mm-hmm. I did it by volunteering at some place that really doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about now, but it was the first inkling of understanding what it was that I wanted to do, what this job actually is, and how to go about making it a career path.
Okay. Still getting a lot of good questions.
Good, because I went a lot quicker than I thought I would.
Yeah, you did. Let's see. Can having a challenge mindset be adversarial, or make it more complicated to wanting to settle down and have a family?
I'll tell you what is complicated is trying to write this book while we have an 8-month-old in the house who is currently sleeping. Thank God. Yes, like the caveat with family is that like you got a lot less time to do the types of things that you want to do just for yourself. But I don't think that it is a complete excuse as to why you can't even tackle the smallest thing that is meaningful to you. So like I'm doing the Whole30, like it's not something I want to do forever, but for 30 days, it's been much easier than I thought it would be in terms of not eating bad food. And I really needed it after like a summer and a pandemic of like, hey, everyone has Zoom happy hours at home every single night, multiple times. So like I found a behavior of mine that I wanted to investigate whether I could reset it. So I did this thing that already exists. But a lot of folks I've talked to, they've done these challenges in the context of their families. They've found something that fits into their lives that is not about, going on the road for 3 months, or like throwing off your entire life and just, very abruptly starting something new. Like it's a condition. Like family and competing priorities are a condition of how we design challenges, but I don't think they make them an exception. I will say it's good to do one at a time. maybe 2 if they're really small. But if you start trying to do a bunch of things all at the same time, you're doing Dry January, you're doing Whole30, you're writing a novel this month, you're working out 2 hours a day. Like, you can't do all that stuff at the same time. I mean, you can try, but like, it'll drive you insane. So my answer, my final answer is no, I don't think it's conflicting. I don't think it's a, what did we say, adversarial? I forget her comment. But I do think yes, it's a condition that you have to design for.
Okay. That kind of leads to the next question. Do you recommend always aiming to have a challenge mindset, or are there times in your life when it's better off to not be? What is the balance?
So I think, remember, the mindset is a set of values and its principles. So I don't want to prescribe that people live this way all day, every day, like gamify your entire life. Like, no, okay, that's exhausting. It's best used in I would say the like lower commitment, higher leverage situations. You know, if you really want to do if you really want to draw on the backs of business cards, like that's something that takes you 2 to 3 minutes or 10 minutes. And that the challenge is there to power you through something that is not just a one-off thing. Like, it will help you go from, I think this would be a cool idea, to I'm actually doing this, to like, man, what is this? Like, I'm kind of learning a bunch of stuff as I'm going. So, you know, I think certainly we can be very modest in how we use it. Times when we don't need a challenge, like, yeah, if we're looking to automate things, like, you know, the James Clear stuff is about habit loops and things that sustain itself. That's a system. That's great. That's, you know, you can kind of look at that as a challenge, but like, you don't need to blow it up into more of like a passion project. I feel like these are like special cases. I look at these as the stories that we tell people when we get together. Habits are the things that make us successful. They keep us sane. They make us efficient, if you like to use the language of what I feel is like the language of robots. Like, you don't always need to be efficient. Like, creativity is not efficient. Like, it's messy. A lot of things we do that are about making things can be messy. And that's where challenges help us frame everything. But, you know, I don't want to send you off in a straitjacket because everything in the world is a challenge to you now. Like, you know, yeah, definitely let's have a little bit of moderation. One other thing I'll say about that is, like, I've referred to life hacking and the automating habits. Like, I see the benefit of doing challenges, either one or several, is that in essence, they make us a little more adaptable. Here's another book that you should read, Range by David Epstein. Have we had him on yet, or is he coming? Okay. Should get, I mean, David's awesome. He wrote a book that first starts out by debunking the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell is known for, and talks about how people like Roger Federer, who sampled a lot of different sports early on, became better prepared for their lives, as opposed to someone like Tiger Woods, who specialized from an early age and then kind of boxed himself in, like, identity wise, I guess, later on. He goes into more depth in the book as to the idea of being an optimizer versus being an adaptable personality. And I think challenges are a tool to develop adaptability, because they can be as short and sweet, hopefully, as possible. They can be bigger. They're mostly short-term experiments to get a better understanding of something, to get some benefit from something, and to open up new doors and new paths for ourselves. So optimization versus adaptability. Like, think about what you're doing. If you're trying to optimize, habits and systems like that are great. If you're trying to be adaptable, if you're trying to discover more things, that's where I think challenges fit in. I think they're complements to each other.
Okay. And you've used the term life hack a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody wrote a question that they still don't know what a life hack is. Could you explain that term a little further?
You and me both, friend. it started off. So it was, the term comes from an internet conference. So life hacking, it has its roots in like the software world. If you notice, a lot of like personal development folks are like software engineers, and they're the SaaS world. Obviously, Matt Cutts worked at Google. Life hacking started at like the O'Reilly Design Conference in like 2004. It was about essentially shortcuts to being more optimized and efficient. Like, how does 20% of the effort get me 80% of the result? It's that type of thinking. So I mentioned before that like it's taken to some extreme ends. One of the most famous is Tim Ferriss talks about in his book, The 4-Hour Body, I think it is, that he became a Chinese kickboxing champion by shedding a bunch of weight before weigh-in, so he could drop down 3 weight classes, and then he rehydrated and became bigger than his competition, and he exploited a technicality in the rules that if you push your opponent out of the ring 3 times, you win by technical knockout. And he won every single one of his matches in this kickboxing championship by just basically pushing smaller guys out of the ring. So it was a life hack. It was kind of like a shortcut or run around the typical rules. So that's where it comes from. Now it's come to mean like, how do you open a CD case? Not that I'm like the oldest person in the world, like people still have CDs, but you used to have to kind of cut the plastic off, or you could, a life hack or a hack would be like, if I just pull the case at the bottom and flip it over, it's off the track, and I can just pull the plastic that holds the 2 pieces together. I don't know why that's the one that comes to mind, but so hacks became shortcuts that like are just things that we could do like easier during the day. But then life hacking as like an overall lifestyle is again about like optimizing things and like trying to extract the most out of a situation, even if it means, the rules don't necessarily apply to me. Like I'm a hacker. Like I figure out my own ways to do things. So that's where it gets, I think, dangerous on an extreme end. Because if everyone acted that way, that would just be chaos. And that's a big part of what Joseph Riegel's book is about. But so that's what I mean by life hacking. There's an entire site, lifehacker.com. It's out there. There's others that, you kind of get like a feel for what they write about and what you do in your daily lives. It's all in pursuit of like freeing your time up so you can do what you want. So it's this means to like reduce all of our daily friction so we can finally do what we want, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And so life hacking becomes this like self-perpetuating, like gaming every single system that we like encounter. So that's the downside of life hacking, let's say.
Okay. Let's see. Most people don't start a new journey in a new direction because they are worried it'll take over their day to day. How to overcome that worry and their fear?
So let me ask you this. What are you worried about the most? It sounds like this is going to take over my life. And I would have to know more about what you have in mind to really speak to what it is that you're worried about, whether it's I'm worried about losing control, I'm worried about this, I'm inventing a challenge that's consuming my life. I've kind of already talked about like we don't necessarily need to be doing things that completely make over our, every waking hour, right? How do you get past fear? I think generally there's a couple things you can do. Number one, find someone who has done what you're thinking about doing and obviously talk to them about it, or just model yourself on them. Face it head on, like use, if it's a mantra of like this time this time it's my turn, not my fear's turn. Like fear gets to sit on the sidelines for once, and I'm going to do this thing. Even if if it's meaningful enough for you to do, you might even do it if you don't like it initially. Just like the Matt Cutts example, like he doesn't want to bike to work. He hates biking to work. He never did it. He never enjoyed it. He never really tried it. So he didn't really understand what it was he was doing. or that he didn't really like. So he had to at some point convince himself, I'm just going to try it once. I'm just going to try it twice. Like, make it the easiest hurdle to overcome at the beginning if you have to do an abbreviated version of the thing that you're doing. But, the fear thing is a natural thing. Like, if I were in Shonda Rhimes's situation and I hated speaking in public, like, I mean, one of the things that I do is rehearse over and over before I get up in front of crowds and speak, or I'll test out what I'm going to say in front of a group of friends. So I find an abbreviated version of what I'm trying to do to essentially like get used to the idea of being afraid, being anxious, getting up and doing it, and then basically having your mind like go blank and just get in the moment, the immersive moment of what you're doing. So, there's a lot more like fear management things, like people will tell you about, like breathing exercises and things like that. But like, again, like I said, I don't know exactly what you're referring to. So like, I can't speak too specifically to it, but a very small progress bar is a really good antidote to fear and barriers and like hesitancy. Give yourself the smallest little bit of endorphin. That's kind of the point of like all of these 30-day challenges. It's not, I'm going to do this 30 times. It's, or I'm going to do this for an entire month. It's, I'm going to do this individually once, now twice, now 3. So you have this little cycle inside of the challenge that becomes sustaining.
There was a second question about fear. So it might, I don't know if this helps you with maybe answering that question as a follow-up.
Yeah, let's see.
It says, can you talk more about flipping the fear? So I guess maybe you would use that term. Fear is often what stops people from taking on a challenge.
Yeah. So the Shonda Rhimes example is she didn't want to do it. She wrote a speech. She looked at it on the plane. She's like, this isn't me. I'm writing a speech that is what I think people expect a commencement speaker to say. So that was the first step. I think she realized that she was afraid to get up there and do something that she doesn't like speaking in public, but she also doesn't want to go up there and do something that she doesn't like believe or enjoy. Like, she's up there just going through the motions, right? That's the sort of fake it until you make it, which is not always exactly true. It's kind of more complicated than that. So what she did was she tore it up and she's like, the only way I'm going to get through this is if I say what I want to say. And that includes starting out by saying, listen, I don't want to be here. I don't like speaking in public, but when the dean invited me, I made a commitment to myself that I was going to try to do more things. I was going to say yes to more things this year, more invitations. And this is one of those things. And so I'm doing this for myself, but I'm also doing it to help you. So she found a little bit of the meaning that got her through, like, why am I doing this? Right. The famous Simon Sinek circle, find your why. Like, what's the root of what's motivating you to do this? And is that meaningful enough that it makes your fears less important? Because most people fear, they fear not the actual act of doing something, but of it either not getting up there and not enjoying it, or of course, like if something goes wrong and like somebody trips and falls, like while they're on the stage, like, of course, but those things are rare and life goes on from those things anyway. And spending the time worrying about those things doesn't really do us any good. So focusing more on this, flipping the fear and making it the motivation, like, because I'm afraid of this, that's why I'm going to do it. Because I don't want to speak in front of people, I'm going to do it. And I'll attach the meaning of what makes it important for me to do, for myself, for the kids out there that are listening to me, that are going to go off jobs, to the things that I want to say about my own life that I wish other people understood. Like, she found the motivation that flipped her fear from being the thing that prevented her from doing it to the thing that empowered her to do it, to make it the reason as to why she's there. A lot of people do things because of the fear. That's the whole point of, like, I want to do this because I'm afraid of it. Like, I don't know anybody that is looking forward to skydiving the first time they do it if they've never done it before. Like, it's scary. I don't want to do it. I'm super afraid of it. I don't know if I ever will. But if I ever did, it would be because this is a thing that people are afraid of, including myself, and that's a reason to do it. So that's what I mean by flipping the fear. You make it the motivator, not the preventer. Not a word. Barrier.
How having a challenge mindset has helped you personally? Do you think that there are things you have achieved that make you happier in life because of this mindset that you would not have achieved otherwise?
Yes. And I'm going to start by saying I'm not going to pass myself off as some super successful person, but I was trained as a journalist. I was not a good speaker naturally. I did it by taking a job that had me go out and speak in front of big crowds, and I got used to doing it. The way the challenge mindset has helped me is that if you're willing to do it, any problem that you encounter can be adapted into a challenge if you want to do it. Not saying that you need to do it for everything, but like it's made me less likely to prejudge whether or not I'm going to like doing something. It's empowering to think, oh, I can try this, and if I don't like it, I never have to do it again. Mm-hmm. If I say I'm going to do something for 4 months and I do it for 3, yeah, it's a little bit of a disappointment, but I did it for 3. 3 months is better than no months. Like I've done a bunch of challenges that I haven't finished. I wanted to record a song every week for an entire year, and I got through 3 months, and then I got the flu, and I didn't go back to doing it. But I have 12 or 13 songs that I wrote because of it. So it was really the container. The challenge was the thing that allowed me to try to do different projects. I mean, writing is a huge area for challenges, like the Pomodoro technique. Like if you take nothing else out of this talk, the Pomodoro technique, which is an Italian term for a tomato, was invented by a guy who had a little tomato timer who couldn't focus. He was a grad student. So he came up with this technique where he would just write for a certain amount of time with the timer, and he turned everything off. And then when the timer is done, he would take a break. And if he was ready, he would go back and do another Pomodoro. Like he would do 1 a day, 3 a day, whatever he felt like doing. But he came up with this container that said, all right, this is my commitment schedule. This is how I'm going to do my thing. So that's how it's helped me. It's helped me see the beginning and the end of things that I want to do, and made them something that could be portable, that like could be used for different reasons. You know, if it's to develop new habits, you can keep renewing these challenges, or if it's just as a more of a one-off thing that might just make a cool story later, it's also good for that. And I'm a big fan of, like, in addition to having our habits, like it's nice to also have like the cool stories that we've experienced over time. Cool stories in your lives are underrated.
Okay, well, I think that is our time's up, but you have been a great speaker to have with us today and given us a lot to think about with challenge mindsets, especially coming into the end of the year when everybody starts thinking about the new year. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to your book coming out in the spring. And thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find me at gregroth.com. I'm pretty easy to find. If you have any questions, if you want to know anything else that we didn't get to. But thanks for all your questions. It was really fun to be here, and have a great rest of the week, everybody.
Okay, thank you. And the recording will be available tomorrow. Thanks.
All right. Let's live it all over again.